There was a time when childhood gave the happiest days of your life, and when the best things in life were free.
Oh, I wonder how deep it is. Look, there's a fish. Where? Up there. Oh, let's go down.
Probably the best things are still free. But in the past 20 years, industries that supply things for children's leisure have boomed. Today, they employ hundreds of thousands of people and turn over hundreds of millions of pounds. Children between 5 and 15 now spend £125 million a year in pocket money, and far the biggest share, nearly a fifth, goes straight into the confectionery shop. Every year, little fists hand £24 million across the counter for sweets and ice cream. The runner-up in the competition for pocket money comes a long way behind. Comics and magazines, on which children spend £7 million a year. But pocket money is only a fraction of what's spent for children's pleasure. On toys, for instance, children spend a mere £6 million. Adults chip in a further £190 million. The total amount spent on children's leisure pursuits is in fact incalculable. A fifth of the whole population of Britain are children, 10 million of them. And the child has become, in the jargon of the business world, a major consumer. This programme will make no attempt to assess the effect on children of commercial pressures. Its purpose is to show economic developments inside three main industries which serve the children's leisure market: toys, books, and television.
You can depend on me, 'cause I'm your friend.
Even in the gloom of the past 2 years, retail sales of toys have been running at about £200 million a year. The manufacturers don't get so large a proportion of that. On the factory price, wholesalers add their 36%, the government about as much again in purchase tax, and the retailer 50 to 55%. But with exports, British manufacturers are earning £80 million a year, just about double what they were taking in 1960. And certainly, at the big toy fairs held in January at Harrogate and Brighton, one's first impression was of cheerful prosperity.
1,000. Now, how much is it?
That's £3 2.
I have 3 of them.
£3 pounds.
There's a tradition of ease and affability in the industry. These are men and women who, while they might never have made a fortune, clearly haven't much experience of running from the rent collector. The industry is made up, for the main part, of many rather small firms, 500 or 600 perhaps.
It's charming. Well, you can imagine Mr. Golden with this in his father.
In the past, it's been a conservative business, but new inventions, fashion toys as they call them, break through from time to time, and some of them make a fortune. The Dennis Fisher Group did it with Spirograph. In 5 years, it sold 20 million sets and increased its annual turnover from £30,000 to more than 2 million.
Stop shortly.
This time, Bluebell were confident they were onto a winner, a doll with a beating heart. Norman Stevens.
We've had to be very careful about Miss Happy Heart because it is a very valuable property, and as a security situation, and I emphasise that we don't leave these things lying around for obvious reasons, we have put it into the bank every night, and when it does leave our possession under other circumstances, we do have a professional security guard guarding it.
Obviously, it's not bad publicity to let it be known that you have a secret worth guarding by an alliance of Barclays Bank and Alsatian dogs. But it is a fact that new ideas are hard to come by and easy to copy. What the big firms guard most closely is not their inventions, but their statistics, just how big the market is for any one of their lines. If they're doing well, they don't want to encourage new competitors to move in for a share. If they're doing badly, they don't want to say so. There is in fact no doubt about how the toy industry in general is doing at present. It's doing badly. And at the annual toy fairs, there was a strong undercurrent of anxiety. It was anybody's guess just how long some old friends could stay on their perch.
It is true that the toy trade are in difficult times. This is demonstrated adequately by the fact that the top 20 companies in our business showed a net profit of less than 1% over the past financial year's trading. At the same time, 70% were wiped off share values, and I think this adequately demonstrates that we are in a tough situation. As to the solution, prices must reflect a carefully calculated profit situation to cover rising costs during the year. Now, my own company, our turnover was 62% up in 1970 as compared with 1969, but the profit return certainly wasn't in that ratio. In fact, in the final analysis, it was rather disappointing.
The general economic depression has hit the toy trade hard. But much more ominously, it's been shaken from top to bottom by the implications of an industrial battle on a scale beyond anything that could have been imagined a few years ago. It's about little cars, the die-cast things that have been on sale for years, dinkies since before the war. Lesney broke into the market with their Matchbox models in the 50s. Leslie Smith.
We have expanded rapidly since 1953, going from one factory to another factory or increasing the size of these factories. And then in 1960, we became a public company, a very successful issue at the time. We were oversubscribed by 15 times. And we continued to grow, had worldwide markets, the United States being our biggest market. In fact, over 40% of our products were exported to the United States. And I think the figure of the company's worth at our peak in 1968 was in the region of £130 million.
The die-cast model car was an ideal line, cheap to make, appealing to children's collecting habits, and within the range of their pocket money. Another big firm, Metoy, also moved into the market in the middle 50s, bringing out cars fitted with windows. And for 14 years, the British industry sailed happily on, turning out exact and nicely finished models. They sold in millions. Then, in 1969, the new thing came from the United States. Mattel, the biggest toy company in the world, brought over its Hot Wheels. The principle is simple. The cars go a long way on a small push, because wheel friction has been cut to a minimum. It was a considerable piece of industrial engineering to apply this in the mass manufacture of a cheap toy. Mattel made a noise about it.
They're the fastest miniature metal cars you've ever seen. Hot Wheels, available separately or in sets like the Strip Action Set, the Stunt Action Set, or the Hot Curves Race Action Set. Hot Wheels, only from Mattel.
Lesney, the Matchbox people, knew what was coming, because Mattel had already knocked them for 6 in the American market.
We were not ready for it when it came, unfortunately, but directly we began to see that the fashion was changing. We set to and had to modify all our molds to accommodate this new type of low friction wheel concept. Very extensive job, because it meant that a lot of our equipment which we had built over the years were little value. Had to produce a special plant for producing these new types of axles, and the hot stamping of the wheels so as to make the model more realistic and give more fun and pleasure. And it has taken us, I suppose, nearly 18 months to get ourselves right in this direction. And now we're ready to tackle, once again with confidence, the world markets which we feel rightly belong to us.
So Lesney and Metoy and their American rival Mattel spent hundreds of thousands in a frantic model car race. It's a game at which the stakes have gone up and up. And if these scenes look more like casinos than stands at a toy fair, it's not really surprising. The market at home and in North America is glutted with die-cast models, and everybody's on a loser. In 1970, Lesney lost more than £1 million. They closed down a factory and sacked 800 workers. A few months later, Metoy got rid of nearly 1,000 workers, a fifth of its labour force. Mattel just won't say how much it's losing on its British operation. But with world sales of about £100 million a year, Mattel can stand a loss over here and still throw money into the research that gives it a constant flow of new products. Toys, in fact, are no longer small time. They're now in the enormously expensive business of rapid innovation and big promotional campaigns. In 8 years, the amount spent on television advertising alone has risen by 6 times to £1.5 million a year. Most of it thrown into a bombardment of the child audience in the few weeks before Christmas.
Super new clothes. Discotheque. Belle of the Ball. Catsuit. They're gorgeous.
Matchbox Motorway. Can you catch the criminal? Block the bank robber.
The Corgi Rocket Skypark set is more than fun. It's a rocket miracle.
It's Chuckles. Throw Chuckles in the air and she laughs.
Can you control traffic? Got the know-how of a traffic cop? Think so? Prove it. Challenge your friends. Motorway and switcher track at toy stores now.
You see it fall.
Spirograph, seeing the way costs were soaring, sold out to General Mills, an American food company with a toy subsidiary. Bob Fieldhouse.
Well, really, the explosive growth of the toy trade is really the explanation, in the sense that originally they used to call it the toy game. It's a toy industry, because it's one of the growth industries connected with leisure. But basically, the toy trade was always undercapitalized. It was based on families and small concerns, and the enormous growth of the trade, and hence the requirements for capital in order to back up research programs, advertising programs, stocking programs is such that money had to come in from somewhere. And by and large, our American friends were the people who had money.
You can depend on me, 'cause I'm your friend.
Our American friends, by autumn 1971, had taken control of about a fifth of this country's toy manufacturing market. Then came the staggering news that Britain's biggest toy firm, Lines Brothers, shaken by a loss of £4.5 million last year, had put the parent company of the Meccano, Triang and Pedigree Group into voluntary liquidation. They couldn't raise enough American money to hold their empire together. For lesser firms, there's now a strong temptation to follow the Spirograph line and sell out while the going is good. But out in Brighton's briny breezes, remote from all these cares, representatives of a firm too small to worry were launching a new product. It's a balloon in which the air is heated by a little gas stove. It rises on a good day to 150 feet. Then the hot air gets cold and it falls, and you can run after it and pick it up again. Cambridge Educational Games regard it as a toy for grown-ups. Adults, they say, are having to regress to toys in order to come to grips with the world. And that, they claim, is very much an expanding market.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
At present, the toy trade in general badly needs the therapeutic properties of the hot oom. But despite all, one man was keeping his pecker up with an abiding precept. Miss Happy Heart's promoter, Norman Stevens.
We're very much comforted by the psychological fact, and this is a proven situation over many, many, many years, that nobody really wants to be a 2 and 6penny father. Fathers want to be £10 fathers or £15 fathers, because this is the positive way in which we all demonstrate our love for our children.
Children's books. Their making is a major part of the publishing industry, employing thousands of people and earning millions of pounds. There are two kinds of bestsellers, textbooks and those endless series for young children whose lovable characters get made into toys and used in advertising. We'll return to character merchandising when we come to look at television, which is now its real heart. Straight children's fiction, books written for older children, is still big business. More than 1,700 new titles are published every year, and a child's book will normally go on selling for much longer than an adult novel, as new batches of customers grow to the right reading age. But it's doubtful whether half a dozen people can earn a living as children's authors, and it's a long haul.
Tolly, come on.
Leon Garfield, chairman of the children's branch of the Authors Society, now enjoys the leisure and the pleasure of an author's life. But it took more than 12 years doing a regular job in a hospital and plugging away at his writing in his spare time. Most children's authors do well to earn £300 a year. What keeps them at it?
The writers, including myself, who concentrate on this, are ones who are very much concerned with problems, not so much in childhood, but in early adolescence. That, well, after all, very few people are fully grown up. Most of them have left problems on the way and perhaps forgotten them. Those of us who write this sort of book are the ones who haven't forgotten them and who are still, for better or worse, trying to work them out.
Alan Garner uses not only the psychological situations of his childhood, but also the physical locations. He earned about £8,000 last year, but through years of penury, he's never seriously considered any other job.
I started to write for children because at the age of 21, when I made the big decision in capital letters, I felt that I couldn't write for people older than myself. Since then, I found that children, and by children I mean adolescents, form the best audience in that they're more receptive, they are more sensitive, and from my point of view, they're more intelligent. In other words, they get what I'm writing about. I've no particular affinity with children. Individuals drive me mad, and when I see them in the mass, I can be as bolshy as anybody can be about children. Oh, has somebody got a pen that works?
Here's a pencil.
No, I don't like pencils. Right.
Whatever their feelings about children, writers can't afford to avoid meetings arranged primarily for publicity.
Now, why do you want me to sign these things? Come on, why do you want these things signed? What difference does it make?
I always enjoy the one. I finished one yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry. I finished writing one yesterday at 10 to 12.
What was it called?
Skiffy. Well, nobody's published it yet.
What's it about?
Well, it's science fiction, you see, and I thought sci-fi. Looks like Skiffy, and I wrote it on my notebook. And it looked like Skiffy, so I thought, well, I'll call the hero Skiffy, and I'll call the book Skiffy.
Hardback books are not usually sold to children. Some are bought as presents by adults. But by far the greatest proportion, about 80%, is bought by public and school libraries, which spend about £2.5 million a year. It's a sore point with the industry that libraries not only get books at a discount, but pay no more however many times a copy is lent out. And to add to the gloom, the market for specifically children's books has been contracting through the 60s. Just as children give up playing with toys earlier, so in early adolescence they now begin to scorn the child's book, which would have made things very black indeed for the children's book industry if it hadn't been for what publishers, with an uncharacteristic burst of strong language, call the paperback explosion.
How dirty them here.
Yes, we haven't got it.
Children's paperbacks had been selling quite steadily for a long time before the eruption of the last 3 years. In 1960, 580,000 copies were sold. By 1970, the number had shot up to 4 million.
There we are, in the bank, wonderful thing to read, eh? Here you are, some change, don't go away. How's that, fella? Enjoy your reading. How much is that, young man? There we are. Have you got a bag?
Oh, yeah. Have you got the race and the chaser?
My gum, you've been saving up, haven't you? Have you seen this? I'm worried I don't know about puppy.
Children's books are at last within the range of children's pocket money. A total of more than 1,200 titles from many different firms. And children now spend nearly £2 million a year of their own money on books. Not very far short of the amount spent by all the school and public libraries in the country. There's also been a happy technical development which makes it possible to produce coloured picture books at paperback prices. The success of paperbacks has spread the funds all round. For some authors, it's just about doubled their income. But the job itself isn't as simple as it used to be. An author is tempted by a number of secondary considerations, not least the possibility of becoming a set piece in schools.
The other influences are inevitably the highly commercial ones around us, what one calls character merchandising, which is a highly specialised field, and although it's very nice to have one's characters in cornflake packets, it's not the sort of thing one can aim at readily. The other influence, and a major one, of course, is television. This is quite incalculable. Speaking only from my own experience, a solitary mention of a book of mine on a midday schools programme, a book that had been written 3 or 4 years previously and had dwindled to a very modest yearly sale, suddenly it sold 1,500 copies in hardback during that month, to the astonishment of the publishers, who were totally unprepared for it.
Television has a more direct influence than the passing mention of a book. No professional writer can afford to work without half an eye on the possibility of getting his work on the screen. Alan Garner, who hit it rich when a book of his was serialised on Granada television, has given the matter some thought.
I personally don't write for money, but having written, I feel that I've got a product and I will go out and sell it as hard as I can. I think also that nowadays we are living in such a world that to isolate an art form, and I don't like the word art, is wrong. And I feel that I am not a writer, I am not a sculptor or a painter. I work right across the board. And if a form presents itself, then that form I use. And at the moment, I'm finding it very interesting to work simultaneously both with a book and to take the same story, and at the time of writing the book, to turn it into television.
5, 4,
This
3,
is blast out
2,
5.
1.
And up we go. Thank you very much.
On film for 30 seconds.
Television is the newest and the biggest industry serving children's leisure.
So it's about a whole load of extra spoons and forks which arrived recently at our collection depot. They'd been held up because of the postal strike.
Of the programmes specifically made for children, Blue Peter is the best known. Its editions, 2 a week in the late afternoon, are watched in winter by the greater part of the child population and a fair number of adults.
Chains. And it actually is a bit dangerous because all the corners here...
Like most BBC programmes, it's done in a studio and under the direct control of BBC staff. The editor, Biddy Baxter.
Right from the very beginning, we wanted to produce a programme that really involved viewers at home, so that they weren't sitting there like cabbages and letting the programme swill over them, but we left them with something to do afterwards. And I think there is proof that the children are involved, because apart from the viewing figures, which are very high, we do have 3,000 letters a week mostly from children, and many of these contain extremely useful ideas for the programme, which are incorporated into the Monday and Thursday editions. We had a letter the other day from a little boy, aged 10, who gave us detailed plans of transforming his teddy bear into a footballer. And I don't think he'd have gone to all that trouble if he hadn't been proud of his idea, and he hadn't felt that we would make use of it on the programme, which indeed we will.
The impact Blue Peter makes on its audience was forcibly brought home to Edward Barnes, assistant head of children's programmes, when he made a film of a vintage car run to Brighton several years ago, of which this is a repeat performance. Blue Peter's viewers had been asked to come out and wave along the route.
We expected, I suppose, a fair response to this. I thought we'd get about maybe 100 children turning out if we were lucky. They lined the route the whole way from Hyde Park to Palace Pier. There were 4 and 5 deep of hundreds and hundreds of children. And then when we arrived at the Palace Pier for the finish, it really was a humbling experience. There were literally thousands and thousands of children. We then realised that, in fact, if we'd been in commercial practice, we realised that we were in fact sitting on a bomb.
We'll come back to the impact of children's programmes, but first it's instructive to look at another aspect of children's television in the making.
Yes, well, now, it said hello, didn't it?
Hello. Now,
so what does hello look like?
Yeah, when it says how do you do
Oliver Postgate, on the left, and his collaborator, Peter Firmin, are on the staff of no organisation. They're in business on their own account to make puppet films and sell the showing rights to television organisations in this country and abroad. They moved their families and their equipment into the Kent countryside so they could work outside the clamour of London.
So what does a Gladstone bag sound like?
Oh, it's on here. Noise.
Well, that says what? That says
hello. That one says how do you do. It's the second one. It's not what it sounds like that's bothering me. It's what it looks like. Because as it comes out of the Gladstone bag, there's something that's got to appear.
Oh, it's circles, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
holes around, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very round, but it's not. It mustn't be words.
No. It's a whatever it is that represents the noise.
The Clangers were a series of 13, now made up to 26, and shown on BBC One. Their making was part of a lifestyle deliberately chosen.
I suppose, in a way, I'm a sort of dropout. Peter moved down here about 10 years ago, and I came down very shortly afterwards, and we've been working away quietly here. I suppose we're a sort of cottage industry. But we're terribly spoilt, because we do what we like, when we like, and we can work till midnight if we want to, and, well, we work quite separately, of course, but we can stop whenever we fancy and start whenever we fancy. And we're just terribly spoilt, really, I suppose. We haven't any sort of connection with civilization. And, well, a few years ago, I was tempted to become slightly more super and take on capital and money and all sorts of things like this, and I thought at the time, well, is it worth it? I mean, I'd just get ulcers, I think, and I'm sure one would if one got too hectic. So we take life at our own pace, and well, it's very nice, actually.
Postgate and Firmin's cottage industry is conducted in a barn used as a studio. The Clangers are the latest in a line of puppet programmes they've done. Making these films is a slow job. The illusion of continuous movement is created by shifting the puppets bit by bit and taking a picture at each stage. It needs 15,000 pictures to make a 10-minute film. Postgate has had plenty of time to reflect upon his creatures.
Because I think the thing about the Clangers is really that they're non-violent. They take a gentle attitude towards everything, and they meet the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, the preposterous things that happen to them, the completely nonsensical things. They meet them all with a consistent courtesy and civility and care, and usually win through. But they're very gentle and live their own lives, and I think they would be very alarmed if they got tangled with our sort of life, the life of earthly civilization.
Postgate's Clangers were badly alarmed when a visitor from the planet Earth brought them a taste of civilized life.
Does it look as if it's standing on the surface?
Yes, yes, it's got its feet down beautifully. Yes, and saucepan and water. Take them out and have them ready to douse it with.
Right, it's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. Have you got your match?
Right, here's the match.
Right, ready now. When you hear the camera going, light it and then go and start pulling it up when I say.
Right.
Okay, off. Pull. That's it. Lovely. Knock it off. Knock the can off.
Yet the Clangers are not so remote from the commercial world with its tie-ups and promotions. Out of the television programmes have come other money spinners. An earlier series, The Pogles, was made as a programme for Watch with Mother. From the Pogles programme have come the Pogles Annual, Pogle Plates and Pogle Dolls. There's a Clanger comic strip and Clanger jigsaws. There are lots of books of all sorts derived from the programmes. There are games. It's what's called character merchandising.
Can't. Nog.
Character merchandising had been done for years, notably with the Disney and Enid Blyton creations. For the BBC, it began with the Daleks in Doctor Who. The success of their exploitation by others, as toys and so forth, spurred the corporation into itself licensing the merchandising of television characters. In 1965, Roy Williams was appointed to start an exploitation department in radio and television enterprises. And if this looks very much like where we've been before, it is. Mr. Williams is making his annual round of the toy fairs, and at this point, doing his best for Basil Brush.
Jim, was the difficulty over Basil Brush's tail. The fact that at the moment the proposal is that the brush will come out of his collar rather than from the base of his spine.
Well, this does present a problem because if we take it right to the base of the spine, it means that the cost of his brush or his tail is going to prove too expensive, and we've got to bring the outfit into a price bracket which is going to sell to ensure success.
BBC Enterprises earn about £100,000 a year from the sale of licenses for character merchandise, nearly all of it arising out of children's programmes. About two-thirds of the income is passed on to the creators of the characters. The Magic Roundabout sells the most licenses, followed by the Camberwick Green series.
Now Peter is going to empty the last pillar box, which is outside the post office. He's taking out his keys and opening the door. Then he puts all the letters in a great big sack and whistles as he marches with his load upon his back.
For Gordon Murray, who made Camberwick Green, Character merchandising was by no means an afterthought. Murray made the series of 13 at a cost which, as a former BBC producer, he knew would barely be covered by a showing on television. The profit would come out of foreign sales of the films and commercial exploitation of the characters.
Well, to start with, I knew that things had to be done pretty quickly. So I rushed off to Selfridge's toy department and Harrods' toy department, I think it was, and I rummaged desperately amongst the shelves, looking for toys that could be character merchandise and trying to find out the manufacturers' names of these so that I could contact them. Well, after a day's work on that, I went to the public library and looked up their addresses, their commercial addresses, and I wrote off, I suppose, about 24 letters saying that I'd got this series on BBC television in Watch with Mum, and that the programs would be going up for some time, and would they be interested in producing merchandise based on these characters. And by return of post, I think it was, I got 24 satisfactory replies. Well, this was very, very good, because this was an absolutely essential part of the operation. The trouble was that I was so busy making films that I hadn't got time to carry on with this marvellous exploitation side of the business. So I thought the only thing to do is to go to the other part of the BBC Enterprises, the other department, and say, look, I'm in a bit of a plight here because I've done rather well on this sort of thing and I want to get the money in. Can we do a deal? And they said, oh, delighted, delighted. Just hand over the papers and off we go. And, of course, they did very well. But this was an absolutely essential part of the operation as far as I was concerned.
Before the ink was dry on the Camberwick contract, Murray launched into new series about neighbouring places, Trumpton, then Chigley. With the merchandising of the characters going so well, it was a happy thought to increase the throng.
3 for Mickey Murphy, 2 for Dr. Mop, 1 for Mr. Honeyman, who keeps the chemist's shop, 2 for Windy Mill, for all the soldier boys who live in Pippin Fort.
Murray himself does only experimental photography. His films are shot by a commercial studio on contract. Murray designed the puppets with their ping-pong ball heads and keeps them in repair. And he writes the script. He has no office and no employees. But foreign sales and character merchandising have lifted him into the income bracket of the managing directors of big companies. Murray's Watch with Mother characters are now being exploited in more than 40 products, from books to soap, whose manufacturers know the BBC has the option to repeat the programmes at intervals over about 10 years. But the most outstanding commercial success of all in television puppetry has been scored by Sylvia Anderson and her husband Jerry, creators of the many science fiction series first shown by ATV and now known throughout the world.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
About 12 years ago for very eager, very young, very broke film technicians who acquired a telephone, a desk, an office, waited for the phone to ring for the distributor to offer them some fabulous epic like Ben-Hur. But of course it didn't happen, doesn't happen that way. And the only work we got was a puppet series offered to us by an independent producer. And the only reason we got that was because we gave a ridiculously low quote. So we made the series, we ran ourselves into the deck doing it, but it did serve one purpose. We were working, we could eat, and it started us on our puppet career, if you like. So then we determined to make our own independent series and make it bigger and better than anyone else had ever done. And we created 4 Feather Falls, which we made for Granada Television. We converted the ballroom in the country house to a shooting stage. And because 4 Feather Falls seemed to be so successful commercially, we then graduated to an empty warehouse, converted that to a studio, employed technicians, spent thousands of pounds on camera equipment, mortgaged ourselves to the hilt, and we thought we were really away. We prepared our next subject, which I wrote in the form of a book called Supercar, which Granada, for their own reasons, decided not to take up. So here we were with a television studio around our neck, tens of pounds mortgaged, no work. So we were really down. But rather like the fairy godfather, Sir Lou Grade, or Lou Grade as he was then, came along and took up Supercar, and we started making puppet series for ATV, and indeed we have never stopped.
The Andersons were in the big time on an international scale, and it was no accident that many of their characters spoke with American accents.
There are 2 reasons. The first one is financial, is because our programs sold to America and went on the American networks, and this was quite unique at this time. And in order to do this, we had to have the characters Americanized, if you like, and speaking so that the American public would understand them, because this was before the British accent was the in thing, because people in the sticks in America, they wouldn't understand at all. So our characters were geared for them. And they coined the phrase kidult for our programs, which is a combination of kid and adult, because so many dads watched to see technically how it was done. So we needed that money, the American money, for our programs. Although they were backed by ATV, we needed the American sale in order to make the sophisticated programs in the puppetry world that I believe we made, particularly in science fiction, special effects and so on. Now the second reason is a creative one, is that in the early 60s, the British boffin was not a terribly glamorous character, not the way he is today. You have the British lawyer, the British doctor, rather stuffy. I don't really think the stuff that TV puppet heroes are made of.
Puppet films made for the BBC could hardly be more English, but they do give rise, as we've seen, to character merchandising. And success on the scale that Gordon Murray, for instance, has achieved points up a problem of principle. The BBC is expressly forbidden to advertise. Dennis Skuse, General Manager of BBC Radio and Television Enterprises, was asked how he justified what were in effect advertisements for character merchandise in children's programmes.
Well, I don't look upon this at all in any sense as an advertising thing. The fact of the matter is that merchandising comes from series which are put on the screen because they are good series for children in their own right. Monica Sims, who's the head of our children's department, will have an idea from a producer built round puppets or a set of puppets or whatever. And the decision and the judgment is purely a program one. If out of that there is the spin-off of merchandising, of toys or jigsaw puzzles or books or talcum powder even, then that's fine. The other thing about it, of course, which so few people ever seem to remember, is that in order to be serious about merchandising, in order to get manufacturers interested in licensing, you do have to have long runs and constant repetition. No toy factory, for example, would just tool up for a run of 6 weeks. So repetition, constant repetition, is essential.
Blue Peter, with its extremely long run and its great influence, has refused to get involved in exploitation. There's a Blue Peter jigsaw, and the producers write a number of books arising out of the programme. There, they draw the line. But from time to time, Blue Peter shows toys to its audience as a matter of legitimate interest, exactly the justification that would be made for showing brand products in this present documentary. Bob Fieldhouse of Spirograph describes the effect.
Well, in actual fact, we didn't start on television advertising. The BBC started for us. In fact, the very first showing of our product Spirograph on television was on Blue Peter. And the result of it was that during the succeeding 14 days, the local post office at Boston Spa, near Wetherby, was inundated with enormous post bags full of letters asking about where they could buy the item. And we had, in fact, to send special wagons to go and collect all the post bags. And, of course, this did, in fact, give us an inkling as to what we ourselves could do with paid television advertising, and which we went on to do with enormous success. Put the company on the map.
Have a little bit of an apple there, come on.
So, a programme which diligently tries to keep faith with its audience helps to put a commercial company on the map. Programmes shown on their merit and for their proved delight to young children serve to promote commercial products of many kinds. Defending character merchandising, Dennis Skuse of BBC Enterprises said this.
Well, the fact of the matter is that we don't live in a vacuum. The BBC, that is, doesn't live in a vacuum. We live in a highly commercial world. We are committed, inevitably, to some form of commercialism because, frankly, the BBC needs the money. If we didn't do the merchandising, then somebody else would. But if we do it, and we are very particular and meticulous about this, we do keep the ultimate control, and we have to pass and approve every product, it doesn't matter what it is, that any manufacturer wants to merchandise. So I think in many ways that it is far better that we should keep control of it than have the thing completely out of control.
Which is about the best that can now be said. Whatever engages a child's attention will be pushed in as many forms as it can be sold in. The question now is not whether it will be done, but how it's done. Children live in a commercial economy. Children are very important to it, because after all, they're likely to be its longest customers.
There were, and in some places, there were 4 and 5 deep of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children.
And when I see them in the mass, I can be as bolshy as anybody can be about children.
Many years, but nobody really wants to be a 2 and 6penny father. Fathers want to be £10 fathers or £15 fathers.
We're not going to make it. We're running out of runway.